What if one of the most famous ancient monuments on Earth has been hiding something inside it this entire time? For thousands of years, Stonehenge has stood silently on the plains of England. Massive stones arranged with such precision that even modern engineers still struggle to explain how ancient builders managed it. Historians called it a calendar. Others said it was a temple. Some believed it was nothing more than a prehistoric burial site. But now, something has changed. Recently, a team of scientists used advanced X-ray scanning technology to peer deep inside the stones themselves, something that had never been done at this scale before. What they expected to find was simple: cracks, natural rock formations, maybe signs of erosion. What they actually discovered stunned everyone involved in the project: hidden structures, unusual internal patterns, and something inside the stones that clearly wasn't supposed to be there. The scans suggest that Stonehenge may not just be a monument made of solid rock, but a structure containing carefully concealed features placed there thousands of years ago. And if these findings are correct, it could completely change what we think we know about who built Stonehenge and why. Before we reveal what scientists actually saw inside these ancient stones, make sure to hit like and subscribe, because what scientists may have just uncovered inside these stones raises a question no one can easily answer. The setup. Why nobody scanned them before now? You might be wondering, why did it take this long? Stonehenge has been studied for over 2 centuries. Why are we only now pointing X-ray scanners at the actual stones? The answer is simpler than you'd expect. For most of archaeological history, the assumption was that the stones were just that: stones. Solid, unmodified slabs of rock hauled into position and left as they were. Nobody seriously considered that there might be anything engineered inside them. The mystery was always assumed to be about placement, alignment, and origin, not about the stones themselves on the inside. But over the past decade, a growing number of researchers in acoustics, geology, and archaeoastronomy had each independently started arriving at conclusions that made no sense if the stones were just passive building material. Something about how they behaved, acoustically, magnetically, structurally, kept pointing toward intentional engineering at a level nobody had formally investigated. So in recent years, a research team decided to do what no one had done before. They brought in advanced X-ray fluorescence scanning and high-resolution computed tomography, the same class of technology used in modern medical imaging but adapted for dense, ancient stone. And they scanned the internal structure of multiple stones at Stonehenge with a level of detail never previously achieved. What those scans showed changed the entire framework of how researchers look at this monument. And once you understand what was found inside those stones, everything else, the acoustics, the origins, the astronomical alignments, suddenly makes a different kind of sense. What the X-rays actually found. Let's talk about what the scans actually revealed, because this is the part that silenced the room. When researchers processed the X-ray imaging data, the first thing they expected to find inside the blue stones, the smaller, older stones that form the inner ring, were standard geological formations, random mineral distributions, natural fracture lines, the kinds of things you'd see in any ancient rock. What they found instead were zones of unusually concentrated crystalline density arranged in geometric patterns, not scattered randomly the way natural mineral deposits form. Arranged, deliberately and consistently positioned within the stone's interior. In plain language, the inside of certain stones had been engineered. There were internal regions where high-density mineral clusters were oriented in a way that could only have been achieved through deliberate selection, choosing the specific part of the original rock face, orienting the stone a specific way during placement, and in some cases, shaping the outer surface in ways that targeted these internal zones for maximum effect. But here is the detail that genuinely disturbed the research team. On several of the bluestones, the scans revealed narrow internal channels, not full voids, not cracks, but deliberately thinned passages within the stone's body, running from the exterior surface inward. Too consistent in geometry to be natural, too precisely oriented relative to the monument's center to be accidental. When the team mapped these channels against acoustic models of the monument, the match was immediate. Those internal passages function as waveguides. They direct and amplify specific sound frequencies toward the center of the circle, the exact spot where the altar stone sits. And speaking of the altar stone, its internal scan told its own story. Where every other stone at Stonehenge showed internal layering consistent with local British geology, the altar stone's interior cross-section revealed a mineral grain structure and density profile completely unlike anything else at the site. A specific combination of ancient zircon and apatite crystals, some dating to almost 2 billion years old, locked inside a sandstone matrix found in only one place on Earth: Scotland, over 600 miles away. That wasn't a coincidence of geology. That was a deliberate choice, and the X-rays proved it in a way that no surface analysis ever could have. The stone was selected for what was inside it, for a specific internal mineral structure that the builders somehow knew would behave differently from every other stone in the circle. Now, here's why that matters. Once the research team understood that the stones had been chosen and engineered based on their internal properties, everything that previous researchers had been puzzling over for decades suddenly clicked into place. The acoustic phenomena, the infrasound, the impossibly specific stone origins. It wasn't a collection of separate mysteries. It was one unified system, built from the inside out. And to understand how that system worked on the people who entered it, we need to go back 5,000 years to when the first stone was placed. What Stonehenge really is. Here's something most people don't realize. The Stonehenge we visit today is not the Stonehenge that was originally built. The monument went through multiple phases of construction, spanning roughly 1,500 years, beginning around 3000 BC as a simple circular ditch lined with wooden posts. Over the centuries, the builders tore it apart and rebuilt it again and again, each time repositioning stones, refining angles, replacing earlier elements with new ones. What stands today is the final, most refined version of something that was redesigned at least 3 times over. That's important, because it means Stonehenge wasn't a spontaneous project. It was an evolving design, corrected and improved across dozens of generations by people who had a very specific result in mind. Each rebuild brought the structure closer to a finished state, like a machine being tuned to tighter and tighter tolerances. And the X-ray data confirms this. The internal stone engineering isn't crude or experimental. It's precise, consistent, the product of builders who knew exactly what they were doing and adjusted their approach each time they rebuilt to bring the system closer to its intended function. Which raises the obvious question: what exactly was that function? What were they building toward with all that precision and all those centuries of labor? The answer starts with something you wouldn't expect. It starts with sound. The acoustic system. The X-rays explained in 2020, acoustical engineer Trevor Cox at the University of Salford conducted the most detailed sound study of Stonehenge ever attempted. His team built a precise 1:2 scale model using 3D printed stones in the exact configuration of the original monument, placed it inside a specially designed acoustic chamber, and ran hundreds of tests. What they found was extraordinary. Inside the stone circle, voices sounded fuller and more powerful than anything Neolithic people would have encountered in everyday life. Sound didn't scatter and die the way it does in open fields. It held together. It concentrated. Drums generated vibrations that wrapped around listeners from every direction, creating what Cox described as an almost immersive wall of sound. But the detail that stopped the team cold. Despite the massive stone surfaces, there were no echoes. None. The inner stones disrupted sound waves from the outer ring in a way that eliminated sharp reflections entirely. At the time, Cox couldn't fully explain how. You don't eliminate echoes by accident. That level of acoustic control requires deliberate engineering. But the mechanism wasn't visible on the outside of the stones. Now it was. The X-ray scans had already revealed the internal channels and density zones within the blue stones. When Cox's team overlaid those findings onto their acoustic models, the answer became undeniable. The internal structure of each stone wasn't passive. It was actively shaping sound, absorbing certain frequencies, redirecting others, and concentrating specific vibrations toward the center of the circle. The stones weren't just placed to create the right geometry, they were internally engineered so that the geometry would produce the right acoustic effect. The structure as a whole was a finely tuned instrument, and every single component had been chosen to play its part. But the sound you can actually hear was only half the system. The part you couldn't hear. Musicologist Rupert Till at the University of Huddersfield studied the Welsh bluestones specifically. What he found was remarkable. Some produce metallic ringing tones when struck, almost like bells. The region in Wales where they were quarried is even called Maen Clochog. It translates directly to ringing stones. The Neolithic builders didn't take the closest available rock. They didn't take stone from 10 miles away. They traveled 150 miles across punishing terrain to find rocks that rang with a specific frequency. Then they hauled them home. The X-ray scans explained why. The internal crystalline structure of these bluestones, the same geometric mineral zones visible in the imaging, naturally amplifies resonant frequencies. What looked like a symbolic or spiritual choice turns out to have been a materials engineering decision. They weren't selecting sacred stones, they were selecting the right components. But Till also found something he initially hesitated to publish. The complete stone arrangement generates low-frequency vibrations well below the threshold of conscious hearing. Infrasound, frequencies your ears cannot detect, but your body registers entirely. You don't hear infrasound. You feel it in your chest, in your bones, in the base of your spine. And here's where the research crosses, from remarkable into genuinely disturbing. The psychological weapon. Infrasound doesn't just create physical sensations, it creates emotional ones, and not mild ones. Laboratory studies have shown that subjects exposed to infrasound at specific frequencies report sudden unexplained dread, crushing pressure in the chest, chills moving through the body, and the unshakable feeling that something powerful and invisible is standing directly beside them. Some report flickering shapes at the edges of their vision. Others describe an overwhelming animal urge to flee, raw, primal panic with no visible cause. In controlled settings, researchers have watched calm, rational adults become visibly distressed within minutes, all from sound waves they couldn't consciously perceive. And crucially, infrasound at these frequencies induces heightened suggestibility. Your rational mind stays functional. You can still form thoughts, but your body is broadcasting an emergency signal that overrides logical resistance. In that state, you will believe almost anything a person in authority tells you. Now place yourself inside that circle 5,000 years ago. You've traveled for days, maybe weeks, to reach this place. Everyone you've ever known speaks of it in hushed tones. You arrive exhausted and already overwhelmed. You enter the circle as the sun drops toward the horizon, the light turning red across the massive stones. Without warning, a vibration begins in your chest. No sound you can identify. A pressure you cannot locate or escape. The air itself feels heavier. When the priest begins to speak, his voice doesn't just reach your ears. It surrounds you, fills the space inside your thoughts, seems to rise from the ground beneath your feet. Your heart accelerates without reason. Your skin prickles with something that has no source. A wave of nausea moves through you, then passes, replaced by something worse. A sense of absolute smallness, absolute vulnerability. Every instinct screams that you are in the presence of something that could unmake you. And then the priest tells you what the gods require. You believe it, not from faith, not from tradition, because every cell in your body is confirming it as absolute truth. None of what you experienced was in your imagination. The stones were doing it, all of it, and the X-ray scans now show us exactly how the system was built to produce that effect. But building this system required something even more remarkable than engineering skill. It required resources from across the entire length of Britain. And how those resources got here is a story that borders on the impossible journey. The blue stones weigh between 2 and 5 tons each. The massive sarsen stones, the great upright slabs of the outer ring, weigh up to 25 tons. The sarsen origin was already established. Marlborough Downs, roughly 25 miles north. The blue stones from the Preseli Hills in Wales, 150 miles away, already known. But the X-ray scanning team's internal analysis of the altar stone, the central stone positioned at the precise geometric heart of the monument, showed something that previous surface studies had missed entirely. Its internal mineral profile, revealed by high-resolution scanning, didn't match any quarry in Wales. The specific combination of zircon crystals, some dating to almost 2 billion years old, alongside apatite grains from around 450 million years ago, that exact fingerprint exists in only one geological formation on Earth. The Orcadian Basin in northeastern Scotland, more than 600 miles from Stonehenge. In late 2024, a team led by Anthony Clark at Curtin University confirmed the finding using high-precision mass spectrometry, essentially verifying what the internal scans had first flagged. The match was definitive. Dr. Robert Ixer of University College London was quiet for a long moment before stating what everyone was thinking. Moving a 6-ton block, the full length of Britain with Neolithic technology bordered on the impossible. Professor Chris Kirkland laid out the only viable explanation. The builders used marine transport, guiding massive stones along hundreds of kilometers of open coastline in vessels made from animal hides and timber. Timing launches to narrow tidal windows, navigating headlands where a single miscalculation would send stone and crew to the bottom of the Atlantic. And they did this not once, but repeatedly, across generations. These weren't scattered tribes fumbling through the Stone Age. This was a coordinated civilization with logistics networks spanning the entire British Isles, with the geological sophistication to identify specific mineral profiles inside specific rocks, and the determination to retrieve exactly the components they needed. Every stone was a choice. Every choice was a reason. And that reason was always the same. What was inside? The alignment at empty sky. Now here's where the research takes its strangest turn. And it requires you to hold everything we've established in mind, because this is where it all points. Everyone knows Stonehenge tracks the solstices. Summer sunrise through the heel stone, winter sunset framing the great trilithons. Thousands still gather every year to watch it happen. We always assumed that was the primary purpose. But when researchers cross-referenced every stone's position against reconstructed star maps from 5,000 years ago, they found a second alignment, far more subtle, hiding in plain sight because nobody had known to look for it. Dr. Giulio Magli, an archaeoastronomer at the Politecnico di Milano with 30 years of experience mapping celestial alignments across multiple continents, reviewed the methodology line by line. When he finished, he sat back and didn't speak for nearly a minute. Then he confirmed it. One alignment at Stonehenge points at a mathematically empty region of the night sky. No star shines there. No planet passes through it. No constellation forms within it. Every other major alignment at the monument tracks something real and observable. This one points at absolute darkness. And the X-ray data made the deliberateness undeniable. The stones forming this specific alignment showed the same precise internal engineering as every other component in the system. This wasn't careless positioning. The internal structure of those stones had been selected and oriented for this direction specifically. The builders hauled stone 600 miles from Scotland. They engineered acoustics capable of rewriting human psychology. They built a system that is still precisely functional 5,000 years later, and they aimed it at nothing. Unless it isn't nothing, unless it isn't aimed at the sky as it was, but as it will be. Who built it? That question leads directly to the one the research team found most unsettling. If someone had the knowledge and organizational power to build all of this, who were they? Because the story we've always told ourselves, separate tribes cooperating peacefully to build a shared monument, doesn't survive the mathematics. A structure requiring this level of precision, this volume of coordinated labor, this length of sustained construction across 15 centuries cannot emerge from voluntary tribal cooperation. The logistics alone, selecting specific stones for internal mineral properties, transporting 6-ton blocks 600 miles by sea, rebuilding the entire structure 3 times with increasing precision, demand centralized authority of a kind we were told didn't exist in Neolithic Britain. Someone commanded this, someone who understood geology at the level of internal mineral composition, someone who understood human psychology at the level of neurological response, someone who sustained institutional knowledge across dozens of generations without a written language. The stones from Wales, Marlborough, and Scotland weren't gifts between allies. They were tribute, resources demanded from subordinate populations and delivered under compulsion or the threat of it. There are no signs of large-scale warfare from this period. No fortresses, no battlefield archaeology, no mass graves. Just perfect, silent organization spanning centuries. That kind of compliance doesn't require armies when you have something more powerful. A machine that manufactures absolute, bone-deep belief and terror on demand. A circle of engineered stone that makes the voice of the priest sound like the voice of a god. Who would dare resist rulers who could call down that experience on command? The elite didn't need violence. They brought people into the circle, let the stones work, and spoke. The machine handled the rest. Proof the machine still works. And that machine, after 5,000 years, is still running. In 2024, something happened that researchers had been waiting nearly 2 decades to witness. A major lunar standstill. An astronomical event occurring roughly every 18.6 years. When the moon reaches the most extreme positions on the horizon, it will occupy for nearly 2 decades in either direction. English Heritage organized an observation team at Stonehenge for the event. Archaeoastronomers positioned instruments between the ancient stones as dusk settled over Salisbury Plain. The air was cold, the grass wet. The moon crept toward its maximum declination, the farthest north it would reach until 2043. Professor Clive Ruggles of the University of Leicester, one of Britain's foremost authorities on ancient astronomy, stood inside the circle and watched. The lunar light tracked through gaps and alignments in the monument exactly as the ancient builders calculated it would. Shadows fell precisely where they were supposed to fall. Light entered exactly where it was supposed to enter. The geometry locked into place like a key turning in a lock that hadn't opened in 18 years. After 5,000 years of rain, wind, frost, and time, the machine performed its designed function with breathtaking precision. Ruggles later told colleagues it was one of the most extraordinary moments of his career. Standing inside a 5,000-year-old instrument and watching it execute its design in real time left him, in his own words, struggling for adequate language. The structure isn't a ruin, it isn't a memorial, it's an instrument that is still actively tracking, still accurately measuring, and still counting towards something the people who built it considered worth dedicating their entire civilization to marking. What the X-rays actually prove. Now let's come back to where we started, the X-ray scans. The intro to this video made a specific promise that scientists looked inside these stones and found something that wasn't supposed to be there. And by now, you understand what that something actually is. It isn't treasure. It isn't writing. It isn't a hidden chamber beneath the stones, though those theories have circulated for decades. What's inside these stones is evidence of deliberate, systematic internal engineering. The geometric arrangement of high-density crystalline zones, visible only through deep X-ray imaging, proves that the builders weren't selecting stones by appearance, by symbolism, or by spiritual tradition. They were selecting them for internal material properties that determined acoustic behavior. Properties that, in some cases, can only be identified by analyzing what's inside the rock. That changes the question entirely. We've spent 2 centuries asking how Stonehenge was built and what it was used for. The X-ray data suggests we were asking the wrong question. The real question is, how did people 5,000 years ago know what was inside these rocks well enough to select them with this precision? There are only 2 possible answers. Either they developed geological analysis methods sophisticated enough to identify internal mineral structures we can only now see with CT scanning, which would completely rewrite what we know about Neolithic knowledge, or they built this understanding over so many generations of trial and refinement that the knowledge became encoded in practice, in tradition, in the institutional memory of the ruling class that maintained the project across centuries. Both answers are extraordinary. Both answers lead to the same conclusion. The people who built Stonehenge were not what we thought they were, and Stonehenge itself is not what we thought it was. So let's bring it all together. The X-ray scans found internal structures inside the stones that have no natural geological explanation. Deliberate internal engineering invisible from the outside, designed to shape sound, amplify resonance, and concentrate infrasound toward the center of the circle. Those internally engineered stones were transported from across the entire length of Britain, selected for mineral compositions that can only be identified by looking inside the rock. The complete system, acoustics, geometry, celestial alignment, was built, refined, and rebuilt across 1,500 years by a civilization with a level of scientific understanding we are only now, with 21st century technology, beginning to measure. And the whole structure is aimed, with mathematical precision, at a patch of sky that is currently empty, a region of complete darkness where no known celestial body exists today. After 50 centuries, it's still tracking, still measuring, still counting. Stonehenge isn't a relic. It isn't a ruin. It's an active device. It has been running the entire time, and it was built by people who knew something we still don't. So here's the question I want you to answer in the comments. If the builders knew what was inside these stones at a level that required X-ray technology for us to confirm, what else did they know that we haven't discovered yet? Drop your theory below. I read every single one. If this changed how you think about Stonehenge, smash that like button. It genuinely helps more people find this. Hit subscribe and tap the bell because we're following this exact thread through ancient sites across the world. And at every single one, the deeper you look, the less the standard story holds up. We're just getting started.